your brain is happy to give you evidence of why you're horrible, you don't deserve success, all of the things. Part of that is recognizing it, which is something I help my clients with. Is that true? I don't think imposter syndrome is something you ever get over. I think it's something you learn to live with and you learn to talk yourself out of, do it anyway. You have to be stubborn about finding your zone of genius and figuring out how to pay the bills in the meantime if you want to do this kind of work. One of the self-sabotages that is super common in high performers is hyper-independence. The unwillingness to accept help, the unwillingness to admit that they need help. And so that's sometimes we just end up talking about that and the risks of hyper-independence and where it's making them less than they could be.
All right, welcome to the Evolving Potential Podcast. This is episode number 12. Today I've got here Dr. Robyn Odegaard. She is a former competitive beach volleyball player, curious about why she performed better certain days than others, led her into the sports psychology world. She actually graduated valedictorian from her high school, but due to her crazy life story, took a few years off before she attended college. She went back to college at 32 and finished her bachelor's, master's, and PhD in 6.5 years, graduating with a PhD in organizational psychology with an emphasis in sports and performance. She's now known as the Mental MacGyver by her clients of founders, executives, pro athletes, celebrities, and more from around the world. She's a speaker and author, having done a TEDx Talk and written 3 books. She primarily helps her clients with overwhelm, burnout, imposter syndrome, and honestly much more. So thank you for being here, Robyn.
Thanks for having me, Todd. I'm super excited to have a chat with you.
Absolutely. So the place I'd like to start really is kind of figuring out first what led you down to choosing those degrees, and then how you ended up moving from degree to clients.
Okay. Well, that is a very big story. So you can't start with, why did you choose that degree? Because my background is what led me to that degree. And yes, being a competitive athlete certainly was part of it. But you have to start back further than that, which is I grew up in a cult. And when I was 18 years old, like you said, I graduated valedictorian from high school, but I was married off to my first cousin. So 3 weeks after I graduated from high school, I was married and I was moved 3,000 miles from home. So I grew up in California. My new husband moved me to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Gosh.
When I got there, it took me about 6 months to realize 3 things. 1, he was not very bright. 2, he was really badly in debt. And 3, he had a drug problem. Now, those 3 things ended up actually being silver linings. Because he was really badly in debt, he needed me to get a job. Married women in my family don't work outside the home. That was a big deal. So I got a job. I was working in the back office of a bank. And I started realizing, oh, look, I actually can make my own money. How cool is that? Because he had a drug problem, he got involved with a drug cartel. That was a problem.
Oh my God.
Because he wasn't very bright, he could not maintain the grooming that had been put in place that said, you're just a woman, you need a man to put a roof over your head, you can't make decisions, you're not very smart. Like he couldn't maintain all of that stuff that had been told to me my entire childhood. So I started kind of learning who I was, growing up, becoming more mature. Now, remember, I married him at 18. He was 29. We were emotionally kind of compatible at that point, but I matured past him pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I stayed for 8.5 years because the last thing my dad said to me was, you're no longer welcome as a single woman in my home. That's what he said to me before we walked down the aisle when I got married. Wow. So I had to figure it out. But 8.5 years in, my husband threw me out. He told my dad it was because I was lazy and that I was just not a good wife. And my dad called and gave me the riot act. He was like, if you had been appropriately submissive, you would have been able to make it work. And my response was, I was submissive. He told me to leave. I did. But what I learned years later was that the drug cartel, the cocaine ring he had gotten involved with, wanted to steal his identity, which they did do. He almost ended up in federal prison.
Oh my God.
But they knew that I did our family finances and that I was a reasonably intelligent human and I was going to see what was happening and I was going to be a problem. So they needed me out of the way. So they convinced him that I was holding him back, that I wasn't a good partner for him, and that he could do better than me. And that's why he threw me out. So if I ever write that book, which has way more crazy stories than that, I'm going to call it, I'd like to thank the cartel, because they got me out of a bad marriage.
Oh my God.
So a lot of chaos in my early life. So at that point, I'm single. I've never dated. I don't know how to make decisions. I really am not good at adulting, even though I'm in my mid 20s at this point. And I have to figure out, like, who am I? And that's when I started playing competitive volleyball. Now, to be fair, I had a real job that paid the real bills. I made enough money playing volleyball to pay the hotel bill, the bar bill, and the gas bill. But I had a lot of fun. It was amazing. Fast forward 5-6 years. Then I have to make my own mistake. I marry a narcissistic, closeted bisexual. 0 out of 5 stars. Do not recommend.
Oh my God.
He moves me from Charlotte, where I've lived for 14 years. I have a network. I get headhunted for jobs. He moves me to Long Island. I get to Long Island and I'm just a pretty girl with a high school diploma. I can't even get an interview. He then promptly takes a job in London, England, leaving me on Long Island. And what he says to me is, we don't need your silly money anyway. Why don't you just go to college? As long as you're available to be, which is essentially executive wife arm candy, come to Europe to host wine tastings and dinner parties and stuff like that, I don't care what you do. All right. So that's why at 32, I got to go to college. And that's how in 6.5 years, I was able to get 3 degrees. He was living in Europe and I was basically running his life and being, flying cover for his lifestyle, which I didn't really know that as much when it was happening. But he comes back. It's very clear that the marriage is not tenable. And I could tell you horror stories about that divorce. But I get out of that marriage with rights to my dissertation, which became my first book, and rights to my business, which at that point was just a piece of paper. It was literally just an LLC. I had to pay him $5,000 to get it back from him because he wanted half of my business, which wasn't a business yet.
What?
Yeah. And I had to figure out, okay, here we go again. Who am I? How do I do this? What does this look like? And I want me to back up and answer the question you asked. I chose the degrees because when I was on the volleyball court, there were some days it was like, I could play this game. And other days, my partner would hold out a volleyball and be like, Robyn, have you ever seen a volleyball? This is volleyball. You know how to play this game? And I was just terrible. So I wanted to understand human performance, how we perform, but also in my trips back and forth to Europe, where I was hosting dinner parties and wine tastings for dignitaries and all kinds of very high-powered people, mostly men, I noticed how unhappy they were. From the outside, their lives looked really good, but they just didn't have anybody to talk to spend time with, to unload on, to work through, to bounce things around, because they never knew who they could really trust. And that's kind of what led me to the business that I have now, which started out as a lot of corporate training and public speaking, doing conflict resolution and communication, and has now morphed, thank you partly to COVID, into being a business psychologist and professional confidant. So that's a very long answer to the question you asked.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. So how did you go from kind of like, I guess, what was your first steps in going from degree to getting your first clients? Obviously, there's some imposter syndrome there. You even talked about feeling it when you were valedictorian. You talked about feeling it when you're getting your master's, getting your PhD, always feeling like, maybe someone was going to tap you on the shoulder and take it all away from you.
There's been a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. So like, how did you kind of get over that to feel confident to be someone helping such intellectuals, such, high professional people?
I don't think imposter syndrome is something you ever get over. I think it's something you learn to live with and you learn to talk yourself out of, do it anyway. And so for me, the first step was when I graduated with my doctoral degree, I was invited to give a talk at a sporting event. It was, I think, put on by the NCAA, if I remember correctly. It was so bad. I did so bad. No. Like, oh my, I look back at that and I'm like, oof, that was terrible. But you have to do the first terrible one before you can get better. And that's where it started. And I just started doing the work. And it was hard. And, people would tell me no. And I was a terrible salesperson. I still am. I still don't do sales. It's not my thing. I basically say, this is what I do. Here's what I understand you need. It seems like it's a match. Do you want to work together? Is that something you'd like to do? But it was hard, especially in the very beginning, because I had no business acumen. I had a degree in psychology. They didn't teach me how to run a business.
Yeah.
So you just start doing the things and you make mistakes and you spend money you shouldn't. I've lost obscene amounts of money trying to hire marketing people to help me, and they do nothing useful.
Oh, yikes.
You just do the things.
It's crazy. And what were some of the things that you were starting to see that these intellectual people, primarily, these founders, executives, that they were experiencing that you felt like you could help with, or you felt like you had the answer for?
Part of it is that they are intellectually lonely and personally isolated. And what that means is they're intellectually lonely because they're doing big things. They're doing big and important new things nobody's heard of, things that are complex. I had someone tell me yesterday, I was talking to a CEO, and he said, very few people understand my business. You get it almost immediately. So it's one of those things of being able to ask curious questions and being able to just say, help me understand. I don't get that. And I'm never afraid to say, I don't understand, back up. It served me well in college. I was the always person who was like, wait a minute, that calculus I have no idea what you just did. Do it again. What? And I do that with my clients. I ask questions, and the very fact that I ask questions helps them understand. So they're intellectually lonely because not very many people understand who they are and what they're doing. The few people who do, which is their business partners, their funders, maybe some of their board, they can't go to those people and say, I'm scared. I don't know how this works. I don't know what I'm doing. This is going sideways. That'll get you a vote of non-confidence. You can't do that. So that makes them personally isolated. They don't want to take it home to their spouse. That ruins the whole night for everybody. If you come home to your spouse and are like, I'm afraid this business is going to blow up. And I just became that. I often say I'm the rock in the hurricane. If your boat is being tossed around by a hurricane and you need a place to set your anchor, I am happy to haul in on that rope. My only rule is if you cut the rope, I'm not swimming out after you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So how did you, I guess, get to the point, or what do you think is some of the things that allow you to feel that confidence to help people when that's their entire life? Like someone's entire business is relying on you and your advice, advice or the
it's
listening.
Maybe it's not
on
me. No, it's
good.
them.
Yes, explain
it's
that,
relying on them and their knowledge. It's relying on me to help them bring out their best. So I never put the pressure on me. I mean, do I often think, I wish I could do more for them? Yes. But that's often more around personal mistakes they're making, whether they're self-sabotaging with drugs and alcohol, or their marriage is imploding, or, I had one client, and I share this story with permission. His ringtone. So my clients get individual ringtones in my phone. So on a Saturday, his ringtone went off, and I thought, that's weird. He doesn't call me. He usually texts, and he never reaches out on weekends. So I picked up the phone and I said, hey, what's going on? He didn't even say hello. He said, Robyn, my dad just went on life support. I'm the executor. Help me decide if I have to kill my dad today.
Oh, man.
And so what gives me the confidence is that I know that I'm a good human, and I can care and I can be empathetic. I also have an incredibly deep background of skills and knowledge and stuff that I can bring to the forefront if I need to. But mostly, I know I'm qualified and I can do it, and I care enough to do it.
That's huge. Yeah, that's a huge decision. Oh my gosh, couldn't even imagine. So I like that you brought up
a lot.
Self-sabotage, and I definitely wanted to bring us there in the conversation at some point, the causes of self-sabotage and or the ways in which we self-sabotage. I love that. I've heard you talk about that a little bit. Go ahead and I'll let you loose on that.
So you probably watched my talk, Take Out the Head Trash, How to Fight the Demons Keeping Us Awake at 3 a.m. I talk a lot in there about self-sabotage and why it happens and whatever. But yeah, we could absolutely touch on it. The first thing we have to recognize about self-sabotage is that I call them the demons. You can call them whatever you want, but they always seem to show up in the middle of the night. And it's partly because our logical brain, which is the part of our brain that is in control and makes decisions and everything's fine, manages to keep them at bay during the day. When we're awake and we're busy and we have stuff going on, the demons stay at bay. But at night, when we're trying to sleep and our logical mind kind of shuts down, our emotional brain is like, hey, all the craziness, everything's wrong. Now, here's the thing. Your emotional brain also can have good ideas. So you have to give space to allow the ideas and the fears and the stuff to come up. But your emotional brain doesn't have access to language. And so it will often just be in complete panic mode. And your logical brain is like, I don't understand what's going on. Why are we so bent out of shape? And I have had clients where I tell them, go to Google and put in feeling words list and look at a feeling words list and find a word that matches what you're feeling. Because what that's going to do, A, it lets you explain it to me, which is helpful, but it also lets your logical brain know, oh, this is what's going on. So we have to understand kind of our logical brain and our emotional brain and how they interact and don't understand each other. So that's one thing that helps with self-sabotage. We also have limited willpower. If you've ever been on a diet, you've experienced this. In the morning, you're like, I'm on a diet. You have a healthy breakfast. You have a healthy lunch. You do good. You maybe have a healthy dinner. All fine. 8 o'clock at night, you're sitting on the couch eating ice cream directly out of the container.
Yep.
And that's because at that point, you've used up all of your willpower and your logical brain is just like, I can't anymore. And so we have to look at how much are we using our willpower to make sure things are working and where is it seeping out? And that, if you have, I call it chaos, but if things in your life are going sideways, your business is on the rocks, your marriage is on the rocks, you're drinking too much, on the rocks, all the things, your willpower of keeping things under control is going to be very limited and things are going to start to fall apart. So that's a challenge. So we have to get to our subconscious brain in an effective way, which means quiet time. That could be meditation. It can be journaling. It can be taking a walk where you don't have your cell phone to your ear. It can be exercising. It can be having a conversation with yourself in the mirror. Some people do. You can also open a Zoom window where you're the only one in the meeting and talk to yourself. That's a thing as well. But if you can get it out so that you can logically process it in words, that's going to be helpful. Now, the gold standard for that is having a really good confidant, whether it's a coach or a therapist or a counselor or somebody that you can talk to, because they're going to be able to reflect back to you and help you and do those kind of things. Now, I will warn you, if you hire someone who's not great, they can do more damage than good because they go rooting around in your demons and spread them out all over the place. And basically you have a box of demons and they dump them out and say, look, your box is empty. And now all your demons are running around. Yeah. They don't do a good job of fixing that. But the gold standard of dealing with this kind of thing is definitely hiring someone and someone qualified to help you do it. So, yeah.
And so
go ahead.
You can keep going if you got more.
I have pages. So we go ahead.
So I'm definitely curious about the idea of self-sabotage in the form of self-medicating and how much of a problem that really is. So I would love you to talk about that.
Yeah. Self-medicating is a bigger problem than I wish it was. It seems like the further up the ladder people get, the more likely they are to be medicating with alcohol, which is perfectly legal, and other substances, sex, eating. There are lots of ways you can self-medicate, and it is definitely an issue. I have definitely had more than one client who we get into the process and they'll say to me, Robyn, I'm drinking more than I should. I need help. How do we do this? And we have to go through, that protocol of what is too much and what do you want to have to be different. And some of them end up in, AA or different things like that. And the challenge with that is when you're a high level executive, you own a business, multi-million dollars, you're very successful, you look super successful from the outside, everything from the outside, your life looks perfect, but you have a substance abuse issue. Finding peers who can help you is hard. Because if you go to a standard AA meeting, you're going to find standard people. And that's not a bad thing. I'm glad. That's good. Yay. Standard people are there. That's good. But they're not going to understand your challenges. If you're, for example, let's say you're making, pick a number, $1 million a year, nice round number. You're making $1 million a year. You go sit in an AA meeting with somebody who's making $85,000 a year and try to explain to him the challenges you're having. He's going to look at you like you've lost your mind because he has no point of comparison. Yeah. And that's one of the challenges that I'm finding for my clients is if they do want peer support in standard of care ways for alcohol abuse or other substance abuse, it's hard to find peers.
So do you find yourself, when you're starting to work with these clients, do you find yourself beginning at a place where you're helping them develop this relationship between their subconscious and their conscious mind? Is that something that is common, or is that kind of, I know you have this thing about like, I don't really ask people about their dreams and ask them what they want to change. And I love that as well. And the power behind that. So you can kind of talk about, I guess, where you start with your clients, what you find yourself using a lot.
Yeah. So with my clients, it's not like I meet someone and like, oh, now they're a client. There's a process, and sometimes it's long because they have to really trust me to bring me in. That's just the reality of it. So it'll start with just a hello conversation. Basically, who are you? What do you do? What are your challenges? And some of those get deeper than others. And some of them, they want to know me. You probably noticed my website has some of my personal life on it. It has video of me and my dog doing circus tricks, because I don't think it's fair for me to say, I want you to open your entire life up to me, but I'm going to be a vault. You don't get to know me at all. Yeah. That wouldn't work for me. And when I've had coaches and therapists in the past, it hasn't worked for me. That's not the way I run my business. So for me, it starts with, hey, who are you? What's going on with you? And sometimes they're literally just hello conversations. And, oh, hey, I'm looking for funding about this. Great. Send me your deck. I'll put it in my folder. If I run into somebody who's looking for that kind of investment, I'll absolutely share your deck. And it doesn't go any further than that. And then all of a sudden, 18 months later, I'll get a call. Hey, do you have any room? I got funded and I really could use someone like you. Mm-hmm. So it really depends. But then after the hello conversation, if they're like, oh, I think I want to work with you, the next step for me is I'll spend a couple of hours with them. And I pretty much let them pay me what they think that's worth. I don't put a price tag on those 2 hours. And those 2 hours are really, let's do the work. Let me ask you the tough questions. And I have them right here. I can show them to you. I have entire questions, like tons of them, that I can ask people. These are powerful questions that I can ask people to basically say, let me get to know you. And, it depends on who they are and whether, where I go with them. I don't ask everybody, all of them, obviously, that would be scary. But those 2 hours, let them know me and how I work and how I could integrate into their life, and let me know them. And sometimes if it's somebody who I think is just wanting to check the box, okay, I have an executive coach, that's not the right client for me. I don't want that kind of work. I want the work with somebody who's like, I need a confidant. I need a professional who can help me and talk about the real hard things. Yeah, we can do that. And then after that couple of hours, if we both decide, yeah, this is a good thing, we vibe, we have a good partnership, then we can talk about whether, what are the next steps and how does that look?
That's perfect. So I learned that myself through coaching, through nutrition coaching, through something called motivational interviewing, which is, figuring
my undergrad,
out.
I worked in a lab for motivational interviewing.
Yeah. So I read a book on it and started looking it up and started watching some YouTube videos on what is motivational interviewing and how to do it. And I found myself having much better results from asking questions than from giving advice. So yeah, that's something that I definitely, if you're willing to talk about the power of asking questions and how much more powerful that is than giving advice, and if you're even willing to read 2 or 3 of those questions that you think are good questions, that would be awesome, because I think that anybody who's listening who might be a coach could really benefit from getting better at asking questions. And the fact that you have all those written down on note cards.
I have a lot of them.
Exactly. Is very powerful. And so I think really great coaches do have like a list of questions. I have a list of questions over here as well, that it's like, I know that these questions are going to pull things out of them that they need to address, that they need to talk about. And that to me is more powerful than always knowing what to say and always having the best advice.
Well, and I don't go into a conversation saying, I'm going to ask these questions. I go into a conversation saying, who are you? What do you need? What do you want to be different? And, one of the self-sabotages that is super common in high performers is hyper-independence, the unwillingness to accept help, the unwillingness to admit that they need help. And so that's sometimes we just end up talking about that and the risks of hyper-independence and where it's making them less than they could be. So that's definitely something. There's guilt and shame associated with that. So you want a few of these interesting questions? I'm happy to share a couple of them. So this is one that's always tough for people to answer. Where do I feel out of integrity with myself? And they're always like, what does that mean? And we can talk about cognitive dissonance and all the different things our brains do to make it okay. But where do your actions not match what you believe yourself to be. And what does that look like? And that's an interesting question. We can go on a whole like rabbit trail about that. Let me just fan through here.
So hold on, we can pause there because that's actually
Okay.
good. So what is cognitive dissonance, and how do we how do we continue doing behaviors that are not in integrity for us?
So cognitive dissonance is when your actions don't match your words or your desires. So what your brain, what you believe yourself to be, who you are, your identity doesn't match what your actual actions are. And human beings are really, really good at kind of justifying that space and being like, I believe I'm a good person, but I litter. Whatever, make up whatever.
Yeah.
But, I can be a good person and I do this thing and that's okay. But if other people do that thing, it makes them a bad person. A really easy example is if you think about driving. Everyone thinks they're a better than average driver.
Yeah.
Which that's not how average works, but whatever. Everybody thinks they're better than average driver. And if I run a stop sign, oops, I wasn't paying attention, momentary lapse, I'm so sorry, my bad. You run a stop sign, you're an idiot, you never pay attention, you're a horrible human, forever, amen.
Yep.
That kind of thing is it. I mean, that's a really simple example, but that's cognitive dissonance. I'm a good person, so I can do bad things and it's okay and it's fine. And that's just a one-time oops. You do bad things, you're a horrible human.
And even potentially another example, especially since I do bartending on the side as well, would be like, I don't drink too much. There's a certain amount of moderation there. That's like, oh, this person has a drinking problem, but I don't have a drinking problem, even though it potentially may have gotten out of lapse, because I heard you say in one of your other talks, wherever you're at, is moderation.
I hate the word moderation because it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. I consume alcohol in moderation, even though it's like, okay, now it's 4 or 5 drinks a night. It's not moderation anymore.
Right. If you're drinking a bottle of anything every day, that is not moderation. Well, I mean, it is for you because moderation doesn't mean anything. But
yep. Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's good. That's good. Cognitive dissonance is very powerful. So go ahead with another question if you can.
All right. Let's see. What else do we have here that we can what is the upper limit on the amount of happiness you are allowed to feel?
That's a tough one. What questions would people have in answering that?
So the issue with when you ask somebody this question, they're like, I'm allowed to feel unlimited happiness. Okay, then why are you self-sabotaging your happiness? Why are you making decisions that are for other people's happiness that make you unhappy? And we start looking for where they're limiting their happiness. We have to define happiness, of course. That's important. But that question, the idea of that question comes from a book called The Big Leap. If you haven't read The Big Leap, read The Big Leap. It's an amazing book. But that's where that idea comes from, this idea that you're only allowed to be so happy. And it probably comes from childhood. As a child, I was definitely told, don't be too proud. Don't pat yourself on the back. You're not that important. You aren't that interesting. And so you create in yourself, other people created it for you. And then you take over the reins of basically saying, I'm allowed to be this happy. I'm allowed to be this successful. And if I go above that, then I get tall poppy syndrome where I stick my head up and my head of my poppy gets cut off. And that's not good. And if you Google tall poppy syndrome, there's actually some really good articles out there about it because everything has to be even. But yeah, that's an interesting delve in question about where am I holding myself back? Why? Who told me that? It's a similar question I ask people when they have to do public speaking and they're afraid. Fear of public speaking is completely about being fear of judged, not wanting to be judged. And so I ask them, who are you allowing to judge you and why?
Yeah, that's powerful. And I've heard that concept through psychocybernetics, and it's in that book, it'd be known as the snapback effect. It's like your self-image only allows you to get to here, and anytime you start getting past it, you end up snapping right back to where you were, mostly through self-sabotage.
I had that problem. Yep.
Yeah. So is there, I know you said like you kind of don't get over imposter syndrome, you kind of deal with it. Is there a way that you have potentially maybe worked on convincing yourself that you deserve more, or working on your self-image so that you're able to get to that next level, or is that something you've helped clients with as well?
Yeah. Oh, I help clients with this all the time. There's a book this book is really dense. So I hate to recommend it because it's super
Please do.
and super dense, but it's called Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma. Nope, sorry.
Wow.
Let me say it again. Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors, Overcoming Internal Self-Alienation. And the
Holy
author's name
moly.
is Fisher.
Okay. I'll look it up.
That book it's an amazing book, but it's very dense. It's written mostly for therapists. And she talks about you don't believe you aren't worthy. A part of your brain believes that. And what's interesting about that, I read that book for the first time a couple of years ago, maybe. When I was in my 20s, I gave the part of my brain that was negative. So I used to be anorexic. She always thought I was stupid. You can't achieve, like all the negative things. I gave her a name. Her name is Harriet. And so even before I read this book about self-trauma and overcoming self-alienation, I gave that voice in my head a name. And that helped me because when she starts spinning, I now recognize her voice and I realize that's not me. I don't own that disbelief. I don't own that. That's Harriet. And Harriet is part of me. She's allowed to come along on my life. That's fine. She cannot drive and she absolutely cannot navigate. She gets to have an opinion and we get to tell her, thank you, Harriet, please sit down.
And how did
that's helped me.
How did you work to build an awareness of Harriet being there? Because I know some people are completely identified in there.
It becomes so interwoven. They're completely identified with
the
a negative voice in their head. For me, it became noticing how badly I talked to myself and thought about myself. And part of it was other people around me pointing it out. That helped. With my clients, I start asking them, do you believe that? And one of the other questions that's in here, I don't know where it is, but it's in here is the voice in your head right? Are those facts or are they opinions that the voice in your head is giving you? And even if the voice in my head, Harriet, is very good at trotting out evidence. You're stupid. Here's something you said that was stupid. Evidence. Never mind, it's 15 years ago. Right?
Yep.
And so you have to be willing to fight that. Your brain is happy to give you evidence of why you're horrible, you don't deserve success, all of the things. Part of that is recognizing it, which is something I help my clients with. Is that true? What are you afraid of? Well, if I do that, that's going to be bad. Why? What's going to happen? And I use a completely ridiculous word. I say, let's do some catastrophication. How bad could it really be? What's the most horrible thing that could happen? And then let's come back from that and say, okay, if that happens, how do we fix it? What would we do? And I found that once you have a plan for the absolute horrible thing, you can move forward because, well, if it happens, I'll figure it out. Everything short of death is figure outable.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, take them down the road of the worst case scenario. And even if that's okay, then definitely everything else is going to be okay.
And, the thing is, you're going to get run over if you just sit there, even if you're on the right track. Like, you have to be moving. Like, that's the thing. And most decisions, you can make the smallest decision that is the easiest to back out of, that'll give you the most information about if you're headed in the right direction. Because if you make a small choice and you realize, oh, I'm going the wrong way, back out of it and do something different. Learn and continue.
Yeah, it's better than inaction.
Inaction is useless. Inaction just means time is passing and you're going to be in the exact same place and probably get run over by someone else doing something.
So with your Harriet voice, you started noticing that it was there. You started noticing that you were talking badly about yourself and that wasn't necessarily true, even though it could easily provide evidence. And then
she still does.
Right, I know. And then you started working towards, did you kind of develop a practice for working towards building more positive evidence?
It wasn't about building positive evidence. It was more about believing in myself and showing. I've often said to Harriet, there's a fine line between being resilient and being stubborn. I cross it often. So being willing to continue, with my background, I could have very easily been rocking in the corner high on cocaine somewhere. That could have been a thing. And there are some people for whom that is a thing and they have to come back from that. And that's a different journey than I've been on. But being willing to keep putting steps forward, keep trying, keep doing the things. So I never overcame Harriet and her voice, but now it's much less hurtful. The one thing I will say, easiest way for someone to hurt me is if they say something that Harriet believes.
Yeah.
And I found that also to be true with my clients. If there is a part of you that believes whatever about yourself and someone else uses that against you, that is going to hurt and it's going to cause emotional damage. That's why when people say things that are super, super painful, it's probably because there's a part of you that believes it. When people say things that you don't believe, you're like, yeah, you're wrong, whatever.
And so if that voice is still there and those beliefs are still there and someone says something like that, do you have a method that you can use to avoid letting that trigger you?
Well, so define trigger. It's always going to hurt. It's always going to be a gut punch. It's always going to be something that causes me harm. And that just is. That's part of being human. Whether I choose to let that spiral me out of control and create negativity in my life is something else entirely. I can absorb the pain and I can say, I thought I fought that demon, but look, there she is, and still move forward. I can also, in my TEDx talk, when you learn there's no water in a well, stop going there looking for a drink. I can also not spend time with people who purposefully cause me harm.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, and so trigger to me would be letting it cause you to react in a way that would not be in line with a cognitive dissonance. It would not be within your own integrity, right?
Right. This is not who I believe myself to be. Yep.
Yeah.
Other people don't get to choose how I feel. I get to choose how I respond to their words, to their actions, to what they do. And, all of us have a real desire for life to be fair, and it isn't. And bad people win, and we as good people lose, and it's not fair, and it makes us angry. Again, part of being human, you have to accept those kind of divots in life, I guess.
Yeah. And so what would you say then prevents you from being the person who sits in the corner and rocks it and cocaine from your hard story? What is propelling you forward? What is what vision is driving you to continue doing this work?
Yeah. So partly for me is learning how to manage stress, which has been an interesting journey in my life. So when I was younger, I managed stress with exercise. I swam, I played volleyball, I worked out, I did all the things. I just would work my body until I was exhausted, and that's how I managed stress.
Same.
As I've gotten older, my body cannot take the level of exercise I need to manage my stress in my brain. And that's been a problem for me as I've matured, aged, I don't know, whatever word you use to say I'm not 25 anymore.
Yeah.
And I've had to find other things that are less damaging to my body and still good for my brain. Things like training my dog to do circus tricks, hiking with my husband. I've taken up art. I'm not an artist. I've taken up trying to learn to draw. I've realized that drawing is not a talent. It's a skill. I can learn it. Makes me crazy. I'm not good at it yet, but I'm working at it.
Yeah.
Different things like that. I also have a coach myself. I will make this caveat: never hire a coach who doesn't have a coach.
I love it. And so what is then also the bigger vision that you're, I guess, driving towards? I know a lot of people like to live in the moment. Some people are thinking really far in advance, have the huge, huge dreams. Where are you at with that? And what do you see for yourself? What keeps driving you forward? What are you working towards?
My passion is helping people. My passion is the moment that someone calls me and says, hey, my dad went on life support. Hey, I found out my business partner's engaging in fraud. Being that person, being that rock in the hurricane, that for me is amazing, getting to be that person. And as long as I have the capacity to do that, my goal, what's driving me forward, is to meet the people who need that. Because it doesn't do me any good to offer it if people don't know that it exists. So that's what's got me out there having the conversations is I've got this great service. I've got this great offer. I'm amazing at this. I just have to meet the people who need it. And that's, yes, I have a business and I have bills to pay, and absolutely. But part of it is I love doing the work.
And so at some point, then that leads me perfectly into you found your zone of genius. At some point, you found your zone of genius.
Yes.
And I guess you could talk about potentially, I know we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but what exactly that zone of genius is and how might other people find their zone of genius?
So there's zone of genius, and the counterpart of that is zone of tolerance. And then things you're just terrible at. all of us have skills. I call them killer skills, which are in our zone of tolerance, things that we're really, really good at, but they don't bring us joy. We don't love them. We don't like to do them. In fact, they may make us unhappy. We're really good at them. Writing code is a zone of tolerance thing for me. I am good at coding. I hate it. I absolutely hate writing code.
Interesting.
Part of that is I'm a people person. Like, I like people. I do not want, even writing books is hard for me. I don't want to sit in front of my computer typing away. I want to talk to people. I want to have conversations. So could I have made a really good living in the IT field? Probably. When I went to school, I had professors who were like, you need to change your major to IT. You're so good at this. Yes, I am. I hate it. No, thank you. And that's the challenge, because that's what we end up in golden handcuffs, right? We end up in a position where we're doing something we're really good at. We don't like it. It doesn't bring us joy. It's in our zone of tolerance, and we stay. Finding your zone of genius means, what do I do that I love, that I can make a living at, and that I would do for free? And that's hard. It's hard to find. And not all of us get blessed to be able to do that. And I will tell you here and now, if I wasn't so stubborn, resilient, I would not be here now, because this business has been hard to build. I'm 15 years in and finally at a point where it's like, oh, look, it's working, but it's not been easy. And you have to be stubborn about finding your zone of genius and figuring out how to pay the bills in the meantime if you want to do this kind of work.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the people that I'm talking to as well. I see that a lot in my personal life, is a bunch of people who are working a job because it's a good job and they don't like it, and they're spending their life waiting to retire. And there's usually something, and whether it's in their hobbies, whether it's when something they wanted to do when they're 8 years old, that they're actually passionate about, that they could be good at, that they could make a career out of, but they don't necessarily see that.
And it's scary. It's scary. I had a client once who called his job his prison sentence.
Yikes.
Yeah. And he knew, like, to the day how many days he had to work before he could retire.
And so do you have any advice?
He was not very old.
Other than just being stubborn and resilient like yourself, do you have any advice for anybody that is struggling with that has got the golden handcuffs on, but would like to start heading down that path of figuring out their zone of genius and
you just made
going
a really
into the
good
fear?
Point. You made a really good point. They would like to. The question is it a dream or is it a goal? Because a dream is, oh, I wish this would happen. A goal is, let me figure out how to make this happen. So if they would like to, it's probably just, it would be better if. They're never going to go through the pain, struggle, sweat, tears, annoyance that comes with having to make that change. And that's okay. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not. There are people who live perfectly reasonable lives in their zone of tolerance, and that is their choice. But if you want to get into your zone of genius, you have to have a plan, and you have to be willing to work, and you have to be stubborn about it. I know I've said that 3 times. I'm going to say it again, stubborn about it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're mentioning that. That's huge, because again, like I said, I think that people want it and they don't know how to get it, and they're scared of it. And so setting the goal around it seems like too big, too scary, even for me or you. Going back to school at a certain age is scary. I know you had a little bit more freedom when you went back to school. You weren't necessarily like raising kids or doing anything like that. But for me, for myself, and for people potentially watching this podcast, it's like you're working a full-time job, raising kids, and trying to move beyond the I'd like to into actually setting a goal. And it is kind of lonely, like you said, like, and that's, so it's having someone like yourself to talk to is huge. And if someone can't afford to hire a confidant, what might they do to get themselves out of that intellectual loneliness?
Absolutely. So real quick, I'm going to answer that question, but real quick, because I thought about it, I want to recommend another book. There's a book called Fooled by Randomness. And it talks about, there's 3 of them, but that's the easiest one to read. Fooled by Randomness, Thinking in Bets, and The Drunkard's Walk. But if you're only going to read one, read Fooled by Randomness. And it talks about how we look at other people who have made it, whatever that means, and we see their journey and they're like, let me follow that and I'll get there. And the kind of analogy that I make about it is that, let's imagine that this journey is getting from the US to Europe. And you look at somebody who made it and you're like, oh, they got on a ship in New York and then they crossed part of the ocean. Then they got on a cruise ship that was passing by, and then they took a whale for a little bit, and whatever their journey was. And you go to do that, but the cruise ship isn't leaving the port, or the whale isn't there, or the turtle you were supposed to ride on. So you have to find your own path. You have to figure it out yourself. Can I give you my story? Can I say here's how I was resilient? Here's how it worked for me. Yes. Can that inspire you? Absolutely. But following my journey isn't going to get you there. You have to go on your own journey. And part of that, this is going to answer the question you just asked. So if you can't hire a coach, or you hire a coach who's terrible and you aren't getting the help you need, I've created something called the Foresting Project. And what that is for many of us, our lives are so complicated. There's so many trees that were lost in the forest, and we can't even look at the individual trees. And so here's how the Foresting Project works. I do this with clients, but you can absolutely do it yourself. Get yourself some index cards. I know, old school. Do it anyway. Index cards. And I color code them just because that's easy for me. And you're going to create a set of cards for your life, your personal life, your business life, if you have, volunteer or church life, whatever. And you're going to write down one card for each person that's in that space and each task you do in that space. And then you're going to turn that card over. And I'm going to say this again. You're going to get a feeling words list. I know I said feeling word list again. You're going to get a feeling words list. And you're going to write down on that card words from that feeling words list that are associated with that person or that task. And I want you to write on that card how much time you spend every week doing, with that person, with that task, whatever, how much time you spend, how much time you'd like to spend. And sometimes the like to spend is going to be more, sometimes the like to spend is going to be less. Do that for your whole life. And you're going to lay it out, and it's going to look like the branches on a tree, because you're going to have basically 3 main trunks of your personal life, your business life, and your volunteer, social, whatever that is. And if you have other things, do that. And then all the people, places, things that you do. And when you get done, I want you to add up all the time. And you're going to realize that you wrote down more time than you actually have in a week. It happens to everybody. But then I want you to look at the feeling words that you have for each one of those and ask yourself, why do I feel about that way? And what that's going to tell you is each one of those little pieces is a tree. Does this tree need to be pruned? Does it need to be fertilized? Does it need to be cut down? Do I have trees missing? Should I plant new trees? But it's going to give you a look at your life in a way you've never thought about it, because it breaks it down and lets you think about it in a way that you probably don't as you're going through life right now.
Yeah, I love that. And I have no problem with the bringing up the feelings word list, because I think that's huge. That's something that going through a psychology degree and being married to an incredibly emotional woman who is very in touch with her emotions, who tries to get me to be in touch with my emotions, and I'm very intellectual. I've literally had to look at those lists. I've had to be like, what am I feeling, and try to gain that awareness, between the subconscious and the conscious mind. And so I love that. That's something that you talk a lot about, is the power of the subconscious mind and how it's trying to send us messages, and yet it doesn't speak in language. It speaks in feelings. And so a lot of people are not able to really pay attention to that. And so,
yes.
So we can definitely touch on, just again, real quick, if you don't mind, some of the ways in which we can build an awareness around some of the things we're feeling, build an awareness around our subconscious mind and the messages that it might be trying to send us.
You have to slow down. You cannot be running on all cylinders, 90 miles an hour all of the time from, bed to bed. You have to slow down and give your brain a chance, give your subconscious a chance to go, hey, I have an opinion. Hey, I have a thought. Have you ever had it where you're leaving the house and you're forgetting something and you can't for the life of you remember what it is? And you get 20 minutes down the road when you've kind of calmed down and everything's fine, and your subconscious goes, oh, hey, by the way, this is the thing you forgot that you wouldn't let me tell you.
Yep.
That's definitely what happens. And so we have to figure out, how do we give ourselves time? For me, it's hiking. When I hike is my time. But I also recommend to people, if you drive regularly, turn the radio off. Stop having input all of the time. It's shocking to me when I ask people, do you ever have silence in your life? And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay, when? And they never do. The TV's on, the radio's on, a podcast is on, they're reading a book, their kids are talking to them. There's never silence. Create some silence, create some space for your subconscious brain to be able to go, oh, hey, yeah, I have a thought.
And just listen to what it's saying.
And at first it's going to be so loud because you're going to be like, I don't hear anything. This is so bizarre. Why am I doing this? And you just have to let your brain kind of go and see what happens.
See what comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So I want to switch gears into performing under pressure. If you're willing to talk about that. So
critical thinking under stress.
Yeah, whether it's public speaking, whether it's, going into a coaching, client call. I know that especially at the beginning may have been something that caused you a decent amount of stress. And performance as well. Obviously, it's kind of all touches in together. I know you talk a lot about how business and sports, they're the same things ultimately.
The same thing.
So what is causing us to choke under pressure, and how might someone, or what are the reasons? Because I know there's definitely more than one. And what are some ways in which someone could help themselves to prevent choking under pressure?
Yeah. So the biggest issue with choking under pressure is you have to realize your problem is internal. And that's sometimes really hard to accept, is that I have found the problem is me. That's kind of how it is. And so choking under pressure for me, you can disagree with me. I would love it if you have a different opinion, if you'd share it. Choking under pressure for me means my subconscious brain thinks I'm not prepared.
Yeah, same.
Right? My subconscious brain thinks I can't do this. My subconscious brain, is overwhelmed. And we see it in sports. You see it in the NFL. Oh, he can't play on the big stage, or, whatever words they want to use. It basically is your subconscious brain believing I can't do this. This isn't going to work. This is scary. People are judging me. And so we have to get access to that. And I told a client just yesterday, I wish I could talk to that part of your brain, because he has a behavior he engages in that we aren't clear what's happening and why it's happening. And I haven't yet been able to get access to that part of his brain. And that's what you have to do. If you're choking under pressure, why is your subconscious brain mean you're not prepared? Did you not prepare? Okay, well, that's easy to fix. Start preparing. Did you prepare, but you aren't sure you can execute? Okay, we can work on that. Did you prepare and your Harriet, whatever that person's name is just jumping up and down going, you're a loser and you can't do this? Okay, that's a different problem we have to address. But thinking critically under stress is all about recognizing what is your state. And what I mean is, this is a really easy, and I have a diagram. Actually, it's over there. I have a diagram of a traffic light, and it's inverted. And if you think about your emotional state being on a scale from 0 to 10, so 0 is absolutely horrible. Life is ending. I should go back to bed and start over. This is terrible. And 10 is, if I was any better, it would be euphoric, and I would think I had died and gone to heaven. Right? So it's a broad scale. But if you think about breaking it down, let's say that if I'm green, I'm at 7 to 10. If I'm yellow, I'm kind of 7, the lower edge of 7 to say 4. And if I'm red, I'm 4 to 0. If you're going to think critically under stress, perform under pressure, you can't be too high into green, because if you're way into green, you're so euphoric, you can't think straight. Do not sign contracts if you are euphoric. It's not good. You won't read them, right? You'll be like, everything's awesome. The world loves me. I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. Don't do that. You need to be in kind of the 8 to maybe 6 space. I think for me, that 6 to 8 space is kind of ideal, because you know this, you've probably studied it. You need a little bit of anxiety to perform at your peak, because otherwise you're lethargic.
Yeah. It's like flow state.
Right. So too euphoric, bad. If you're on the other end of the spectrum, if you're down in the 4 and under spectrum, you're so angry, you can't even think. Your logical brain is shut off. You're not creating memories. Things are so bad, you're just trying to survive. Maybe you're being chased by a lion. Don't sign contracts then either. Don't do anything. Don't even try to have conversations with anybody then. You're just not going to be in a good state. A lot of us, when we are failing under pressure, we're in that lower yellow down near the 5-4 range, and we're not functioning at our peak because our emotional brain is so overwhelmed that our logical brain has gone offline. We also see this when people mess with our emotions, and I'm probably going to say something that may make your listeners angry, Tony Robbins is really good at this. Tony Robbins is really good at hyping people up and getting them super excited and then asking them for money while their logical brain is offline. Right? And it feels good. He's really good at getting you into that euphoria where your logical brain is offline and your emotional brain is like, yes, I can spend thousands of dollars I don't have because this feels awesome. So if you're going to think critically under stress, if you're going to perform at your peak, you've got to notice what your state is. Are you red? Are you yellow? Are you green? Where are you? And then you have to have ways to manipulate that so that you can get into the peak range of 6 to 8 or, whatever's peak for you. I'm just 6 to 8 for me is really good. And that can be breathing. It could be biofeedback. It could be rituals and habits that bring you back to center, whatever it is for you. But that's what critical thinking under stress or performing at your peak, that's where it all lies.
Yeah, so figuring out and getting more in touch with that state.
Well, and preparation, of course, but assuming you're preparing properly, finding your state is the way to do it.
That's a big deal. So if someone has prepared enough and they're just getting in their own way through their own fear mechanisms, through their own head feelings of head trash.
Head trash.
So what is, I guess, for an incredibly intellectual person, I feel like my viewers, from what I've seen on YouTube and stuff, men 25 to 45, dealing with the feeling side of things, sitting down and listening, getting to the quiet place and hearing what those things are saying to you, it's definitely very difficult. And so on a quicker scale, everyone wants the instant gratification. Everyone wants to get there quicker. What are some ways, if someone was in that yellow or closer to red state, that they could kind of move themselves up to a green place?
Well, having a good coach and somebody that you can call, especially a concierge coach, that's the fastest way to do it that I've found. I've had clients call me and be like, I'm not okay. And, what is the thing that we say colloquially? Talk them off the ledge. Help people get back into the right state. So that's the fastest way. Have someone you trust that knows your story, that you don't have to explain it to, that you can just call and go, I am not okay. And they're like, all right, let's dig in and figure it out. That's the fastest way. This, you've probably done it for people.
Yeah.
Barring that, the first thing you got to do is notice, regardless of what you're going to do. You've got to notice, I am not okay. And then you have to stop whatever don't try to do the thing when you're not okay. In the middle of a game, take a timeout, take yourself out of the game for 2 plays, do your ritual thing, whatever it is, but don't try to perform when you're not okay. If you're supposed to go on the stage and you are absolutely petrified, don't get on the stage. Give yourself 2 minutes to, do some power poses, to get your blood flowing, I jump up and down, whatever it takes to rearrange your state. We see toddlers do it where they're just so overwhelmed and they literally lay down on the floor and they just have a temper tantrum and they scream and they kick and they whatever, and then they're fine. As human beings, as adults, we need to give ourselves that outlet of, I am not okay. And all right, now I'm fine. Where was I? What am I trying to do here?
That's so funny. Yeah. Cause actually, I don't know if you've looked into any of Peter Levine's work with like the why zebras don't get ulcers and their whole, like they get scared, they run away from a lion, they shake it off, and then they're fine.
Yep.
And we really struggle to do that with ourselves. We just continue going. And that's why you said you can't be on overdrive all the time.
You can't. And I have literally gone into bathroom stalls right before I'm supposed to go on stage and just to get the extra adrenaline and stuff out. I'm sure people are like, what is going on with her? Shake, rattle, and roll, whatever it takes, but get yourself back to that space.
Yeah, that's so funny that you brought up the Tony Robbins thing, because I know he's really big into that, like getting into that state. I never really thought about it as like that. But you're 100% right though. Like to get people in such a euphoric state that it feels like nothing could possibly go wrong, and you don't really necessarily want to be that high up on a scale when you're signing thousands of. Oh, I'm going to sign up for this $3,000, $5,000 program, and then I'm going to leave here and I'm going to start lowering back down from that place of a 10 to maybe a 6, and realize like, holy shit, even though like I feel ready to do this, maybe that wasn't such a big, great idea to do something that big. And he talks about taking massive action.
He blames them. He blames them. So it's like the diet industry. Look, we gave you this great diet. You didn't stick to it. You failed. You're terrible. You're a horrible human. That's not how it works. Diets aren't meant to be stuck to like that.
That's literally what got me into down this path, actually.
Really?
100%. Yeah. So I was a bodybuilder, nutrition coach, personal trainer, and then I would start to give people would just say, I just need the perfect meal plan. If I just had a meal plan, if someone just told me what to eat, I'd be all good to go. And I believed it. I believed it first. At first, I thought people just needed to learn how to move their bodies. Then I thought people just need to learn what to eat. And then it was like, now I'm going to learn macronutrients, and I got a precision nutrition certification. I'm going to tell people exactly what to eat, and then they're going to be good. And then I did. I felt very jaded. I felt like, okay, look, you asked me for the meal plan. I wrote a meal plan for you. It's the perfect meal plan. I tailored it to your body weight. I tailored it to your body fat. I tailored it to your body type and everything. Yep. I even catered it to the foods you like to eat, you know, and then they don't follow it. And then I'm just like, well, you clearly didn't want help.
Right.
You know, and I started realizing that's not
what's happening. Yeah.
And I'm making them feel worse about themselves because now they're feeling like I went through this process. I spent the money on the coach. I had him make me a meal plan. And I guess I'm just not cut out for this.
I can't do it. I'm a failure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so it's like, and so that's why I kind of really want to help people get in touch with what are those subconscious things that are sabotaging themselves, that are getting in the way of
sabotage. Yep.
Yeah. And figuring out ways in which we can, especially do it for ourselves. And a lot of people, I would love if a lot of people would just get a coach. I really would.
The thing is, though, they have to be coachable. It doesn't do you any good to hire a coach if you know, what is the saying? Don't hire an expert and then tell them how to do their job.
Yeah.
That's the thing. If you're not ready to change, if you're not ready to fight those demons, if you're not ready to figure out the self-sabotage that you're dealing with, having a coach is just going to frustrate everybody. Because they're going to tell you, here's how you do it. Just do these things. And you're going to get fooled by randomness. And how many life coaches do we see who are like, here is my journey. Do these things and you will succeed. No, you won't. Unlikely.
Yeah. And so and I don't like the idea either of waiting for people to hit rock bottom. Once people hit rock bottom, then they'll come around and then they'll want the help. And so that's always been a hard thing for me to accept too. This is more personal to me, but my brother overdosed from drugs.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so it was always like, at some point he'll hit rock bottom. At some point he'll come around and realize that his behaviors are, too much. And so I know a lot of that is the program that he went through at a very young age, us being in foster care and things like that. But at the same time, it's like, I have a hard time getting over some of this facts of like just letting people suffer. And so it's like, it's really hard to kind of figure out like, how do we help people that aren't ready for help, that don't want help, and aren't reaching out as coaches. And so that's been something that's been hard for me to deal with.
You remember what I said about I'll haul in on the rope, but I won't swim out after you?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to keep yourself safe on the island. And if they don't want help, you can't force help on someone. That's not how life works. And you know that from motivational interviewing. You can't tell someone what to do. Yeah. They're not going to do it. If they're not ready, you have to just say they're not ready, and that's okay. And so that's why I don't work with people who just want to check the box of I have a coach.
Yeah.
I don't want that kind of work.
That's good. It's better for your mental health as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so if someone's sitting at home watching this and suffering in silence, how might they work towards gaining awareness of that and seeking to improve themselves?
Well, it depends upon what suffering in silence means. Are they suffering and they want change, or are they suffering and they want magic? Because a lot of people I want to continue to do the things I'm doing. I want to continue to drink. I want to continue to self-sabotage. I want to continue. I don't want to change anything. I just want things to be different. That's not how it works. If you're unhappy with where you are and things aren't working, you've got to change something. You don't get to continue doing all the things, all the self-sabotage, all the bad habits, all the bad self-talk, all of the things, and expect a different result. And that means, in the very least, stop going in the wrong direction. That's one case where I'm like, at least pause.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to take steps in the right direction, but stop going in the wrong direction.
I love that. And so now on the flip side, do you have any stories that you can share without impinging upon any client stuff, of people that you've really been able to help overcome some of the stuff, and they've really like started an amazing business, or exited their business with success, and things like that, that you've been able to kind of, okay, I pinpointed this, and this conversation we had, or this question I asked really helped this person overcome some things. Like, I love if anybody can share stories at all. That's very powerful.
Yeah. So for me, a lot of the aha moments for my clients are very personal, and they would recognize it if I shared them, and that would be not ideal. Because that's the interesting thing about confidentiality. Is confidentiality that I can tell you and you don't know who they are, or is confidentiality I can tell you and they wouldn't recognize it that I was talking about them?
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is there are a lot of times where I ask questions, and I know in psychology it's always, oh, blame your mother. No, we're not blaming anybody. We're just looking for what happened so that we can understand it, so that we can change it. And a lot of times I'll ask questions about, what happened and where was this and where did this come from? A powerful question is, what was the first time you heard that? Especially if someone has really negative self-talk. When was the first time you heard that? And I asked that question of a client, and he had to pause. And then he started to cry. And he told me a story about the first time he consciously remembers being told something. And it happened to have been his mother that said it. And I asked him, how old were you? And he was like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, like that age range, really malleable. And I said, was that true then? He said, no, I was an innocent little boy. It wasn't true then. I'm like, okay, why is it true now? And that for him was a really powerful question. When did you last hear it? Was it true then? Why is it true now? Sometimes it goes a different way. When did you first hear that? Was that true then? Yes. Is it still true? Because so many of us have maladaptive behaviors. So things that we learned to do at some point in our life that were protective, that were good. They were adaptive behaviors that kept us safe. That now, as adults, where we run our own life, are maladaptive. Unfortunately, there's a part of our brain that doesn't realize we're no longer in that unsafe environment. And so we're still doing the behavior. And so the same question applies. When did that first happen? Was it adaptive then? Was it correct then? Sometimes the answer is yes. Is that still the correct behavior now in the life you're living now? Most of the time, the answer is no, because the part of their brain hasn't been able to realize, oh, I've grown. I'm a different person. I'm in a different place. I'm safer now. I get control. I get to make decisions now. So I don't know. That's not really a story per se, but I hope the emotion that it conveys comes across.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And so then, to keep it more broad, then, if you were to get invited to speak to a sports team or a boardroom of people,
yeah,
they might be two different things, so maybe you can give two different answers, or maybe it's the same stuff. What might be some broad things that would come to mind that it's like, you're a performance expert, help my people perform better, and you're like, oh God, okay, like which way, where to even begin? Obviously.
I always start at the same place, head trash. Okay, always I start with head trash. And I have to say, there's a version of my head trash talk. It's called Take Out the Head Trash, How to Fight the Demons Keeping You Awake at 3 a.m. on my YouTube channel. I wrote it's for entrepreneurs. I gave it to entrepreneurs. That's the one that happened to have been recorded. But I give that same talk to athletes. I give that same talk to executives, founders, people looking for jobs. Like, all of us deal with head trash. And I would love to ask you, just because it's a fun conversation, when I say head trash, what does that mean to you?
Just all the BS stories that I'm telling myself, all the fears that I'm holding on to that don't need to be there, the fear of judgment, whether it's fear of success, fear of loss, just things that are not true, that I believe are still true for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. And how do you notice your head trash? Where does it show up for you? I hope you don't mind. It's just helpful, I think, for people to have a concrete example.
Yeah, no, I don't mind. For me, I guess it's just, I think I notice it when I have conversations with people, which is very powerful. When I'm soundboarding, when I'm telling my own story to somebody and I'm saying, oh, I just don't feel prepared enough for this, or I don't feel like I'm cut out for this. And then someone turns it back on me. My wife is great at this. And like you said, having that person that you can call is very powerful. Having a person, whether it's a coach or whether it's just someone in your life that you can talk, that will talk you off the ledge. My wife will put me in my place, or a coach will put me in place. I had a call with a guy on Monday who I'm telling, like, I'm like a new mental performance coach and I don't feel necessarily like I've got experience. And he's like, you have plenty of experience. You've got plenty of skills. You've got plenty of knowledge. And so for me, it's generally in conversations that I find myself and I hear myself telling a story that I don't even necessarily believe, that I'm telling it to someone and I don't want them to believe it. That's the main thing. I don't want them to believe the story that I'm telling, but it's the story I've been telling myself that I don't want them to believe.
I can share a great example of not believing I have the expertise. And it highlights how we don't realize how much we know. So I was in New York for an event and there was, some TV interviews and radio interviews and different things happening. And another woman who was there came up to me in the evening of the first night and said, Robyn, you have to help me. They told me I have to wear makeup on the TV interview. I don't know anything about makeup. You have to help me. And I was like, I'm not a makeup expert. What? What are you talking? Me? You want me to help you? And she said, Robyn, you look good on camera. You clearly know how to do your makeup. You know more than I do, which is nothing. So please help me figure out. If it's not you, it's nobody. And I was like, okay. So we found a drugstore in New York and I basically just got her some basic makeup and was like, okay, you need a foundation. You need some powder. Here's some mascara. Here's a lip color that looks good on you. She was so thankful. Am I a makeup expert? No. Would I claim to? Would that be something I put on my website? Absolutely not. But in that moment, I knew more than she did and I was her lifeline. So the question I asked myself, not am I the expert? Do I know more than anybody on the planet? Do I know more than this person in front of me who needs my help right now? And if the answer to that is yes, I'm the expert. I need to step up and be helpful.
And so your take out the head trash and categories and topics like that would be what you consider yourself to know more about than like a top level business executive. Because I know that would be tough where like you're going into, you do consider yourself to be somewhat of a business expert as well, which is why it's so powerful that they can talk to you, because they can talk to you about their personal problems, but they can also talk to you about problems they're having with their business. And so clearly, I think I would, going into that conversation, feel a little intimidated, like this person knows more about business than I do even. How am I supposed to help them? It's like, but they don't know more about their own mind, right?
No, they don't know more about head trash. They don't know more about the demons that are keeping them awake. There's a lot of everyone knows more than me about something. Full stop. Absolutely everyone knows more than me about something. So I can learn something from anyone. But I always know more than everyone about something as well. We're all unique. How does the saying go? You're one in a billion. You're also one of a billion. It depends upon how you want to look at it. So I can learn from people and I can teach people always.
Yeah, that's huge. So that head trash talk is your number one go-to, helps
my
people over the world.
go-to for absolutely everyone. Yes. It's the place that I always start because it's the self-sabotage right there in a nutshell. Self-sabotage and head trash.
That's amazing. I love it. So I'm going to wrap it up here and I'm going to let people figure out a way to find you, to get in touch with you, whether it's through Instagram, LinkedIn, your website, whatever you want to direct them to now, you can. I'll help you and I'll put things on the screen through the editing process. So absolutely. So awesome. Where can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Absolutely. I'm there, but my website, which is mentalmacgyver.com, which I know MacGyver's hard to spell. I'm sorry. Just is. mentalmacgyver.com. You can find me there. And there's a button on my website that says, I think it says, let's talk or let's chat. You can click that and actually get 30 minutes on my calendar to have a hello conversation. So if anybody wants to have a hello conversation, we can do that. And I mentioned my YouTube channel. If you search Dr. Robyn, just Dr. Robyn and with a Y, you'll find my YouTube channel. And that's where my my podcast, which I'm no longer doing, but there's 600 episodes is on there. And as well as the version of my head trash talk that I mentioned is on my YouTube channel as well.
Okay, perfect. So I've got one more question, and I'm curious.
Uh-oh, is this a hard one?
I don't know. Maybe depends on where your mind's at. So
all right.
I'm curious where you would like your business to go. I'm curious where you see yourself building this out. Is this something that you want to continue doing face to face when you're 80, 85? Do you see yourself retiring? Do you see yourself building this into some gigantic business? Do you see yourself running seminars and building coaches and having coaches underneath you that you train them on your system? Like, what do you see this building into?
I do not see it being something that I try to train people to do. I think that each of us has a unique gift, and this happens to be mine. And anyone who I tried to teach to do it would do it differently and not as well. And I don't ever want to create a business that's a job where I have to train people to do the work that I love. I want to do the work I love. So I never want it to become some big hoopty big thing. I'm happy to take what comes my way, what I mean to that is if someone reached out to me and said, hey, can you come and do a training about head trash? Sure. Am I going to go chase that down and beat it down and market it and do that? No, I'm not. Been there, done that, didn't like it, wasn't good at it, didn't work. So I am perfectly happy to have a business where I work with half a dozen, maybe 10 people, and I get to make a huge difference in their life. You know, like that story where somebody's walking down the beach, tossing starfish into the ocean, and someone says, there are hundreds of starfish here. You'll never make a difference. And they pick up a starfish and they toss it into the ocean and they say, I made a difference to that one. I'm perfectly happy doing that. And as long as I can make a difference in people's life, I'm happy to do that. Now, when I'm 80, whatever. If I stop being able to make a difference in people's lives, then I'll stop doing it.
I love that. See, yeah, I'm all about helping people find some sort of lane in which they can continue doing well past an age of normal retirement of, I'm going to be 55, 60, 65, and I'm going to retire because I've really actually hated doing this job, you know?
Yeah.
And so I love talking to people like yourselves who can really develop a lane in which, like, you could easily be an older lady, an old lady can bear, and just full of wisdom. I couldn't even imagine the books that you've read by the time you're 80, the conversations you've had with people, the different questions that you found to be powerful for people that you could definitely make a huger impact than you're even making now. So that's awesome.
And as long as I stay active and interested and learning, I mean, I attend where people pitch their businesses. I told you, I think before we started recording, last night, I listened to 30 different founders pitch their idea for funding. That helps me grow. It helps me stay relevant. I hear some amazing ideas on there. And as long as I'm willing to stay relevant and have interesting conversations with people, why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah. I guess I got another one then. Is there any other continuing education that you see yourself getting? I know we talked about Dr. Bob Choate before this. Dude's got like 2, 3, 4 PhDs.
He's on his third PhD.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you see yourself continuing to get more education, or do you just love reading books, or you feel like you're happy with where you're at?
So you probably know. So I have my 3 degrees I mentioned. I also have I went to the Center for Nutrition Studies at Cornell and got a certificate there. I've done a lot of different things. I love auditing college classes. So Coursera, have you heard of Coursera?
Yeah, I have.
Love it. Go on there, take courses. I have courses on there from all over the world, universities everywhere. Love taking courses there. I just like to learn. Do I see myself pursuing another academic degree? No. I am not an academic. I don't like the academic space. In fact, I just got invited. I have 2 colleagues who are academics, and we're speaking at the International Leadership Association conference in November. And they reached out to me and they said, hey, we've got all the academic background, but we need somebody with some real world experience to come be on the stage and share with us. Nice. That's me. I'm all about, what is it like in the trenches? What does it look like in the real world? So no, I will never go get another set of letters behind my name, but I will always continue to learn.
That's awesome. And I love that. And I'm in the place where I'm trying to bridge that right now, where I'm like, I know that I don't want to just be an academic. And yet here I am, working towards a PhD. And I'm like, okay, at some point I'm going to have to get in the field. That's why it's really nice to talk to people like yourselves who have bridged that gap already, have gotten out, gotten over the pain, and gotten over the hardship and the fear and the self-sabotage to really start a business and be successful.
Yeah.
So
I knew I was never going to be an academic. Even when I went to grad school, I knew I will go through this, I will jump through this hoop, but that is not the pool I want to play in.
Gosh, yeah, that's crazy. I know.
Never me.
Yeah, the PhD seems like a ton of work, but
it's daunting. It's daunting.
Ultimately worth it. So I'm happy that you did that, and I'm happy you get to work at an amazing career, doing what you love. And I hope that someone reaches out to you from this conversation, because you sound like you are an amazing to work with, and really, really able to pull, the greatness out of people. So thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Todd. I really appreciate your time and the work that you did to make this really great. I mean, I've been on podcasts where they're like, tell me what to ask you, and you did the background work, and I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, it's my honor and it's my pleasure. I would never, I know that your time is probably worth, I don't even want to guess and put a number on it, but your time is probably worth, so much. And so thank you for being willing to come on the podcast.
You're welcome.